Okay, we are live, but we got to let it breathe. Hang tight for just a moment, and we will get tonight's show fired up for y'all. Stoked. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him, Zack Kelberman. Zack, little birdie told me that there's some all the chips are on the table tonight. This week in the fantasy league championship, dude. What's going on? Are you sweating this? I know you're in it. Tell us what's up.
If you can see my eyes darting around, it's why I have the Cowboys game playing simultaneously because Rob Bucksbaum, $5 super. Thank you so much, Rob. Good luck in the fantasy championship, Zach. I wish you the best and may the best team win. Hashtag any given Sunday. Just watched that movie last weekend. Still a classic, my favorite football movie of all time. But, Rob, this is going to be a close matchup. I'm kind of in the wait-and-see mode with what's going on with Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew. I'm deciding on my running backs right now, but I'm watching the Dallas game because I know you have Dak Prescott. I have the Cowboys defense. I have the Cowboys kicker. It's going to be an interesting weekend, and like you said, may the best man win.
It's an exciting championship game, to be sure. But at the same time, this is what when your team, the team that you cover and the team everyone that's in this room loves is 4-11. These are the things we now live for, Zach, when it's week 17, when it's week 18, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a nice bonus of putting up with the Broncos this year, of being in the fantasy championship. But I'm not going to lie when I say I'm nervous about the outcome this weekend.
Well, listen, there's a lot that has happened since last we were able to speak with everybody Monday night. So we had the news, of course, of Nathaniel Hackett being shown the door. And then the next morning, Zach, we got to hear from George Payton and Greg Penner. Side by side, Greg Penner basically saying, no, I'm sticking with George. I believe in George. I still have confidence in George. There was a lot that I want to get your thoughts on from that conversation. We heard from Russ yesterday. We heard from the new interim head coach, Jerry Rosberg. There's a lot to get to, plus all the coaching rumors, the Sean Payton stuff we'll sink our teeth into. But first thing is first. What I know it's hard to call it now a gut reaction a few days after the fact, but what were some of your takeaways from the Greg Penner, George Payton presser?
Well, first of all, Excel Dude says, I seem like a Drew Lock. I don't know what that means. I put on Fool My City. I mean, I can rap that song with the best of them, but I don't know what a Drew Lock clone is exactly.
Secure the bag?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's me for sure. Scott did a really good job of cutting up the press conference and uploading it to the channel. And I watched the videos over and over, and I watched them with a different eye each time, Chad. I focused on George Payton's body language, his nonverbals, and he really looks defeated, both personally and professionally. The takeaway I got from the press conference right away is that he is marginalized. Greg Penner has come in and pretty much taken over the de facto GM role in addition to being the CEO and co-owner, and George Payton's hanging on by a thread. I think his seat is scorching hot. He might, I've heard, be fired after the draft. A lot of general managers and there's, the staff, the coaching staff, the scouts, they hang on board until after the scouting process is over, the draft process, and then they're gonzo. But regardless, I think his seat is really hot. My second takeaway is I really appreciate Greg Penner's take charge, no BS attitude, and his the way he comported himself. I was really impressed with his apology to Broncos country, everything he said after firing Hackett and being so new to the team, but still being so invested already. This is the type of leadership that the Broncos have lacked since Mr. B passed away.
Yes, indeed. I'm trying to find a lost super chat real quick. The chat jumped him, so hang tight. I'm just going to read it off YouTube. Sam Bam, love you, big dog. Thanks for getting one in super early. He says, evening, Chad and Zach. I liked your article, Chad, about the Sean Payton rumors. I would think that Payton will be interested in the job, but if he takes it, it will be mostly for non-monetary reasons, I feel. Fingers crossed. We'll get a lot, and thank you for that very generous super, Sam Bam. You're the man. We'll get a lot more into the Sean Payton stuff, the rumors and whatnot. Hang tight on that, Sam Bam. Don't go away. Drake, what's up, bro? Good to see you. Drake throws down some really good articles. He's a podcaster in his own right over on the Colts beat on our sister site, Horseshoe Huddle on the SI.com Fan Nation Network. He says, I believe Frank Reich, now this is a man knows a little something about Frank Reich, okay, covering the Colts, is perfect for the Broncos. He failed with a meddling owner in Indy, but new ownership like what Denver has and Russell Wilson would be nice, in my opinion. Frank Reich, that's the one thing that unfortunately, Zach, he didn't have in Indy was quarterback stability. And, you know, we can joke, we can, well, I mean, I guess it's more gallows humor now because the joke is actual based on reality as far as where Russell Wilson is as a quarterback. But he is, you know, he's going to be going into his 12th season. Frank Reich, that would be the first bona fide guy. I mean, we can talk about Phillip Rivers, we can talk about Matt Ryan, and the last, you know, the swan song from Andrew Luck. But Frank Reich having Russ Wilson in Denver, a ownership group that maybe isn't as meddling as what he dealt with in Indy. What say you?
First of all, apparently the Zach was Zach Wilson, and I'm not going to even entertain the idea of Zach Wilson coming to the Broncos. Just no, I'm not giving it a second thought. Frank Reich, it would be the high floor move we've been talking about. They've been swinging for the fences with the high ceiling guys, the first time guys. Frank Reich wouldn't be the sexiest hire, but he has experience. He had a winning record in Indy. He got to the playoffs. The thing is, though, he failed with a meddling owner. But the impression I get is that Greg Penner is going to be a lot more meddling than we all anticipated. So would that be a situation that Frank Reich would want to come back into? I don't really know, but I would not cry. He's not my first choice. If you can get a Sean Payton, a Jim Harbaugh, I'd go for them first. But if they end up with Frank Reich, that would be the stabilizing force they need right now to kind of right the ship and get back to competency level.
Man, you would really have to, for either one of those guys, for what it's worth, whether it's Payton or Harbaugh, the price tag to get those guys is going to be enormous. In the case of Jim Harbaugh, though, Zach, if you could woo him with the financial package, right, with the compensation package, get him out of the college ranks back into the NFL, at least you're not giving up a first-round pick to the New Orleans Saints. Do you like the idea of Harbaugh more as a problem-solving guy? Who, I mean, he wins everywhere he's gone as a head coach. At the highest levels of football, whether it's the San Francisco 49ers, what he's done in Michigan, his scheme, it's going to be, if he were to come here to Denver, it wouldn't be foreign in terms of what the players currently know, what they've played, what they've ran the last few years, kind of West Coast oriented philosophies. He walks a good line, I think, Zach, between being a disciplinarian and also an accessible guy as far as his players can come to him and relate to him. But he's a little bit more on the I'm above you, I'm the boss kind of scale. I don't know, definitely more so than Nathaniel Hackett, but I'm kind of liking the idea of Jim Harbaugh, but I can't tell you which one's less likely to happen. There's so many obstacles to either one of those options that I have a hard time telling Broncos fans to pin their hopes on it. And yet, and then I'm serving this back to you, we've got two different ESPN insiders linking Sean Payton to the Broncos. And of course, Jeremy Fowler saying that the Broncos are gearing up to, quote, make a major run, or at least that's the rumors he's hearing on the inside of things at ESPN.
Yeah, you're right about Harbaugh. He's definitely a winner, and that's a quality that is hard to replicate, and you either have it or you don't. The thing with him, like you mentioned, he's a grinder, but sometimes he wears on you. You know, he can get on your nerves, and he's not overly, I don't know. I don't want to say he's not a people person, but again, he wears out his welcome pretty fast. And the thing is, you already have a polarizing mercurial figure in Dove Valley in Russell Wilson. Is there room enough for both of them in this Western, so to speak, Chad? I don't know. I feel like it'd be one or the other with the power plays and egos and pride. And also, if you bring in Harbaugh, you can kiss George Payton goodbye because Harbaugh would want full roster control and the ability to pick the groceries, I'm assuming. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons. But if you compare, you know, Frank Reich and Dan Quinn versus Jim Harbaugh, to me, it's no contest. I'm going Harbaugh all the way if I can get him.
Rello Country jumping in. Appreciate you, my friend. He says, Jerry Jeudy, pardon me, guys, I'm still a little bit under the weather, so bear with me. Jerry Jeudy defending Russell Wilson on Twitter, gut reaction. Yeah, I saw that, of course, and it was basically in response to something Shannon Sharp said, which to paraphrase is his teammates are fed up with his high and mighty thing. He puts himself above them, and they're sick of him. It doesn't resonate in that locker room. That's why none of his offensive linemen, Zach, are picking him up, necessitating the backup Brett Rippon to go getting in the offensive line's face, pick him up, right? Which we now know for certain that was what Brett Rippon was saying to Dalton Reisner that instigated that little altercation in LA on Christmas. But Jerry Jeudy, I don't know. I think if it was true what Shannon Sharpe was saying, Zach, I don't think Jerry Jeudy or KJ Hamler, both of whom took to Twitter to defend Russ, would go out of their way to do that. Honestly, I don't think so. I think the truth, though, like is often the case in any controversial matter, is probably somewhere in the middle. There probably are players that Shannon Sharpe has heard from that say, the shtick has worn off. It'd be one thing to put up with the shtick if we were getting the results. But yeah, Russ, we're not feeling it. But I think the guys on the offensive side, they see the grind he does put in. And I mean, we can clown on some of the things Russ has done, Zach, but the dude does work his butt off. The results haven't been there. It has been a really weird season as it relates to the injury bug and coaching incompetency. So I'm still open to the possibility of Russell Wilson having one of those big bounce back, comeback player of the year type seasons, even though that's reserved for injured players, the actual honor. But what say you?
Well, Shannon was also making the point, as others have made, that Russell Wilson should have his office taken away, his parking spaces, plural, taken away, and be treated like any other player. And that I agree with. But it's a good thing that teammates, amid a horrible year in which they were directly affected by Wilson's quarterback play, came out and defended their quarterback. I don't remember Jerry Jeudy doing that for Drew Lock. Do you, Chad? I mean, if anything, he was saying he got his conditioning in under Drew Lock, and he was complaining about not getting the ball. But then again, actions do speak louder. You saw KJ Hamler rip off his helmet, and stomp around during the Colts game. You saw Cortland Sutton show visible frustration last week against the Rams. So it's a mixture of both. I'm happy to see that teammates are sticking up for each other and the locker room's on a total lost cause. But some of the points that Shannon made, I think, had some truth to them. And sometimes the truth does hurt.
Well said. Dylan, we're going to get to this, bro. Our OG Dylan in the house, of course. We got to grab the Duchess, though. The Duchess doth not wait, okay? Nor do we make the Duchess wait. You know this. Everyone knows this. Michaela, thank you for the top rope super chat. We love you. We appreciate you. I hope you had a great Christmas. Hope your holiday season has been stellar. She says, hello, family. Much love. I like either Harbaugh or Payton equally. On this subject, Michaela, I want your thoughts because not long before we went live here tonight, Thomas Hall published an article basically saying two reasons to kind of pump the brakes on the Sean Payton hype as far as landing in Denver. Go read it. But one of them was the Bountygate thing. How much of now, for those of you who don't remember, Cliff Notes version of Bountygate, Sean Payton suspended, fined, etc., for sanctioning a system that was created by his then defensive coordinator, Greg Williams, where the players were incentivized through bonuses under the table to injure opposing players. Okay. And then when it got brought into the national spotlight and there was a league investigation, Sean Payton went to great extent to try and cover it up and whatnot. That's why he ultimately paid the price that he did. He had to pay a gnarly fine. Saints got sanctioned as an organization, and then he had to sit out the entire, I want to say it was 2012 season, as his punishment. Does that take any of the bloom off the rose for you, Zach? And Michaela, tell us in the chat.
Not for me at all. And I was going to ask you because, sarcastically and genuinely, when that took place, and it was 2012, that's 10 years ago, Chad. And 10 years is a long time for us mortals. 10 years in NFL time is an eternity, and then some. So I'm not thinking for 1 second of Sean Payton's role in Bountygate. I think of Sean Payton for what he did with Drew Brees, and Sean Payton for even what he did with Jameis Winston, turning him into a competent passer. I want his offensive acumen. I want his leadership. I do not care about an incident that he wasn't directly involved in 10 years ago.
It doesn't bother me either. We can split hairs on just how involved he may or may not have been. Obviously, he was aware of it. Obviously, he took steps to cover it up in the aftermath. But let's remember, this was 2009, okay? Well, the actual events that they were trying to cover up. And specifically, the NFC title game that year, Zach, if everyone can remember, Saints, Vikings, the Brett Favre-led Vikings. And to me, it's the water is so far under the bridge, it might as well be hundreds of miles. Sean Payton, it's 10 years is a long time in the league. And I am, as you say, it's not just his offensive acumen. Can you imagine that innovation, that creativity being applied to Russ and to this scheme and what the Broncos have personnel-wise on offense, which isn't nothing, especially if they get a little luck from the injury bug. But not only that, Zach, his competency as a leader and a manager of a team.
Yes.
He went through different defensive coordinators over his tenure in New Orleans, and he usually had the same guys helping him, the key guys anyway, as far as offense is concerned. But you could always trust that he was going to hire the right guys to do their job. The Saints had a few, step backward type of years. That's one thing that separated, I'll say, Zach, like say the Peyton Manning, Colts and Broncos, the Tom Brady, Patriots of its era, even in, I would say, the Aaron Rodgers Packers. The Saints, what's different is they would have a 2 or 3 year run of dominance, and then they'd have a couple of middling years where they would miss the playoffs with the same coach and quarterback combination. Then they'd storm back and again be one of the best teams in the league. And then, 2 years, and then they take a step back. And it was kind of like that. I don't know what the explanation for why that is exactly, but if we're looking at skins on the wall, even compared to Jim Harbaugh coached a team to the Super Bowl, didn't quite get over the hump. Lost to his brother, the Baltimore Ravens, in that Super Bowl. But Sean Payton defeated the Jim Caldwell-led, Peyton Manning-led Indianapolis Colts in the Super Bowl.
Who I want nothing to do with, by the way. A lot of Broncos fans want Jim Caldwell as a steadying hand. He inspires no energy and nothing to me. It's hard to sell him to the fan base. You made a good point about breaking down the Broncos roster, even on a wide view level. Russell Wilson, the talent they have. George Payton said something pretty revealing, and he showed way more of his cards than usual in that press conference. But he said, I can sell someone on this roster. I can sell these players to a prospective coach, and I can do the same thing. You can name enough talent there, even with all the injuries, even with all the dreck surrounding the team, where it's appealing if you were to take a look at the players and pair them with someone as big-brained as Sean Payton. That wouldn't be a 3-year rebuilding turnaround. That can be a 1-year turnaround for the Broncos by having the right guy in place.
And it was also encouraging to hear, George Payton hinted at it, Zach, across the pond during the Jacksonville press availability, but to hear the way he discussed the Broncos injury situation, and they're going to be revamping the whole strength and conditioning, sports science, nutrition, the whole 9 yards. It's time to restart that. And so I think it's safe to say that when the majority of this coaching staff, as built by Hackett and Payton, is sent their walking papers at season's end, I'm feeling pretty comfortable and confident, Zach, at this point. Let me just put it this way. I'll be surprised if Lauren Landau is not one of those people walking out the door, and then we'll grab Naj.
Or Vince Garcia, the head trainer. But someone has to fall on the sword, just like Hackett did for this year's disaster, because it's not limited to 1 year. This is a 5-year occurrence now, year after year, where the Broncos are decimated. It just happened to come to a head this year where half the roster is on IR, millions of dollars tied up on IR. And it reached a point where, 3 years ago, Chad, really quickly, it was just you and I talking about Lauren Landau. No one really knew that he was the big muck-a-muck in the Broncos facility. Now everyone's saying his name. But before you say his name, you know what people are saying? Fire Lauren Landau. Something's got to change, and I hope it will.
And guys, a great resource to put it fully in perspective. The eye test and your own ability to reason and recognize the world around you, the number of players that are on IR, the number of salary cap dollars that are on IR. Obviously, something needs to change, but go read Eric Trickle's article on this subject, okay, from, 2 or 3 weeks back. Excellent work, the research he did on that. And it shows it's no coincidence that the Broncos became one of the worst injured teams in the NFL when Luke Richardson took his talents to the Houston Texans, and this cat, Lauren Landau, took over in his slot. Naj, love you, big dog. How are you? Was it a good Christmas? Mama Bear, is she happy? Did the kids get some new shoes? Hope it went well, brother. He says, as disastrous and painful as this season has been, really appreciate you brothers being here to let us vent. Right now, it's hard to see anything positive, but got to stay positive. A win versus the Chiefs would be special. How crazy would that be, Zach? I mean, I'm sitting there listening to Jerry Rosburg yesterday, which, by the way, I got to admit, I enjoyed listening to this man talk. We didn't really know, we knew about him, but as far as his career in the NFL, he's never really been exposed to the microphone because he's always been an assistant. He's had coordinator positions in the past, so I don't want to paint with too broad of strokes, but it's been a long time. I liked what I heard from Rosburg. How crazy would it be if the interim coach comes in and snaps the streak?
Yeah, I mean, if he does that, you have to at least consider making him the full-time guy. It reminds me of, I know it's premature, but Rich Bisaccia taking over for John Gruden last year in Vegas, and he was a special teams guy. No one really knew who he was, and he got the pulse of the team down, and they fought harder for him, and they turned the season around. I don't think it's going to happen, but even if they are competitive against Kansas City, more so than they were in week 14, it would lend credence to the fact that an adult is finally in the room, and you need that adult to be the glue holding the team together. I was impressed by Rosburg. I know he had like a 12-minute preamble to open up his press conference.
Yes.
He caught some heat for that as well because people love complaining about everything, but he was to the point, he was direct, and 2 days on the job, he had the cashews to personally fire Dwayne Stukes and Butch Berry. It wasn't George Payton, it wasn't Hackett, it was Rosburg coming in and making things known that it's unacceptable and this can't go on. We need more Jerry Rosburgs in Dove Valley than Hackett's.
I like that he just got up there and started dictating, and he didn't do it out of some kind of it wasn't out of some arrogant, I'm the boss now, so everyone listen to me. He just got up there, and you can tell this is just who he is. Every member of the media that was in attendance, I can promise you, was eating that up because it was the first exposure to this guy. And it turns out, Zach, he's a good speaker. And not only that, he's interesting, and he seems to be genuinely affable and kind, but at the same time, pretty black and white. Like, he seems like the kind of guy when it comes to discipline, hard but fair, right? Reality. I want to get to more of what you mentioned about his comments on the firing of Dwayne Stukes and Butch Berry, but let's grab Michaela and give everybody a quick update on the Super Chat Superstar rankings this month. She says, anyone saw the Sean Payton movie, Home Team? Do you know what she's talking about, Zach? I don't.
I've heard of it. I have yet to see it. I'll be sure to check that out for sure. And one point, not to segue off you, Michaela, but we're talking about Rosburg. Chad, you either have it or you don't. It applies to quarterbacks, players, athletes in general. You either have that it factor or you don't. And Rosburg has it. Nathaniel Hackett did it. Simple as that.
We'll see exactly how much he has it when the rubber meets the road at Arrowhead. But yeah, I liked hearing from him, dude. Real quick, here's your update, gang. Top 5 on Super Chat for the month of December. We've got tonight, we've got tomorrow, we got let's see, tomorrow's Friday, Saturday. So tonight and tomorrow really are the last 2 opportunities to make some headway, as you know, or in case you're new to Mile High Huddle, always growing is MHH. We take the top 5 finishers cumulatively on Super Chat in a given month, so in the month of December. Those 5 names go in a hat. We draw one out. They get to choose a Broncos jersey of their choice that we get shipped out to them, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, Deanna Hendry is number 1, followed by FA at number 2, Ethan, the DWI guys, at 3, Naj at 4, who has climbed into the top 5, Liliana, that's Mama Muti. I doubt we'll hear back from her again, right? Because her boy's no longer a Denver Bronco. And then just a few of the names outside the 5, like Gary Palmer throwing down, Sam Bam throwing down, both of whom have climbed. The Duchess just outside, and she'll climb, of course, after tonight. David Wilder, Coach Chris. So there's your update on the Super Chat Superstars for now. But Zach, turns out we thought, oh, okay, when the Broncos, when the Walton Penners, when Greg Penner finally said, to hell with this, I'm embarrassed, Hackett's gone. Oh, and by the way, take your coordinator and your O-line coach with you. No. According to Jerry Rosburg, when he was made interim head coach, the firing of Dwayne Stukes, special teams coordinator, which is also, for what it's worth, that's Jerry's specialty as a coach, and Butch Berry, that was Rosburg. Rosburg said, no, these guys are done. They're out of here. And then when you look back, Zach, in retrospect, at some of the things that Stukes said when Rosburg was first hired. Remember, Rosburg wasn't initially on this staff. He was brought in after Hackett kept stepping on his you-know-what those first 2-3 games of this season with game management issues. And it turns out Dwayne Stukes, you could tell now in retrospect, it was a cold answer at the time, but now it really seems like he interpreted Jerry Rossberg's arrival as a big threat to his standing as the special teams coordinator. And Jerry got his, for whatever happened in between, we don't know. All right. But it seems like Jerry said, I got the power now. Goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely won the war, and I'm so glad you brought that up. There's a video floating out there of Stukes' comments, and in other words, he was very dismissive of the Rosberg addition, and pretty much said, I can handle it, no need for him to be here. Well, he has a job, and Dwayne, you don't anymore. And I was a Stukes fan at first, but he was, in the end, in hindsight, way more talk than he was action. But you're seeing what a head coach who doesn't want to be everyone's best friend and want to be Step Brothers, the movie with everyone, what he comes in and does. It's a business, Chad. And I love what Rosberg said. I'm not here to build a resume. I'm not here pretty much beyond the next 2 games. He doesn't really give a you know what, and he exemplified that by firing 2 of the weakest links. If he can get to Justin Outen next, I'm a Jerry Rosberg fan for life.
Well, and we also learned, obviously we knew he was close with John Harbaugh, but we learned in that presser that it's his best friend. Like, they're literally best friends. So you're getting some of that, pardon me, you're getting some of that Harbaugh aura, or whatever you want to call it, juice, whatever, in Jerry. And yeah, Scott, you might know this. When's the last time an interim head coach was kept as the head coach on the cycle? Right? I mean, it never happens, dude. Ever. Rich, but if there's ever been a coach deserving of it, it was Rich Bisaccia last year. And even he didn't
Kitchens?
get the gig. Was he the interim when they fired?
I'm trying to think. There's got to be someone.
You might be right, but it almost never happens. There's always an exception that proves the rule. All right. But the exception does never disproves the rule. So my point is, as it relates to Rosberg, yeah, he's not trying to make friends. He's not trying to sink roots. He knows his days are very numbered and short-lived as far as Denver is concerned. But here he is, being asked to be the interim. He recognizes the responsibility and the magnitude of it for what it is. And guess what? He's going to give it his damnedest for the 2 weeks the team needs him to do it. And then he'll be out the door. And who knows? Maybe the next coach that comes in and says, hey, you want to stick around and coach special teams? Because you kick some butt. We appreciate you. Thanks, Jerry. We'll see. Garth, appreciate you, bro. He says, I hope Penner moves on from Lauren Landau. And I like Harbaugh less, I guess, right, than Payton. By the way,
less than son.
I'm liking this Rosberg, who's in with the Harbaugh fam. Yes, indeed, Zach.
I also love, while we're on Rosberg, he was asked who's going to call plays for the offense this week. And he said today, I don't have to help out Coach Reed, meaning Andy Reid, more than necessary. So he's going to keep that a mystery. I just love, he gives 0 Fs, Chad. He's 67 years old, but he has a lot more energy than someone like Vic Fangio at 60 whatever. So for a 2-game interim coach, I really like this idea of Rosberg leading the team and not Dom Capers or Ajiro Evero. We got David Kilgore, though, $4.99 super. Appreciate you so much, David. He says, what would the cap look like if Wilson did retire? Would you guys see that possibly happening? I don't know. Scott would have to pull up the cap numbers on that. It wouldn't be pretty for the Broncos. I don't see him retiring, though.
Yeah. There's rumors that he might that the Broncos might try to convince him to retire. It's not going to happen. And by the way, David is a longtime Super Chat superstar here, an OG at MHH. Appreciate you, brother. I don't know what Scott's trying to communicate with.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah, Scott said if Wilson retired, he only has a $22 million cap hit next season that you would get back, but it would be relief for the rest of the contract, which is big in 2024 and 2025. I think, Chad, the more realistic thing, Russ is not going to walk away. He's making too much money, and you're tied to him for another year. So hire a head coach, see if you can fix him. And if not, plan B is draft a quarterback with your own first-round draft pick in 2024.
We'll see. David, it's great to see you tonight, big dog. Appreciate you. Welcome back. I thought it was interesting, by the way, on the Rosberg subject. Just last thing, and then we'll move on to some other topics here, okay? Because I know maybe the interim head coach with 2 games left on his schedule is not the most compelling topic. But back to the Dwayne Stukes thing, when he was talking about the special teams, and he goes, we were ranked 32nd in the league. And if I'm not mistaken, there are 32 teams in the NFL. It's like, oh, dude, slammed. So I don't know. I like Rosberg. I don't think he was necessarily trying to twist the knife, but whatever revenge. I don't even know if it was about revenge, to be honest with you. I have no reason to believe that, but I think he came in and he saw he's kind of been biting his tongue all year on what he's seen on special teams. And so when the baton fell to him, he said, first things first, I know what needs fixed on that side of things. This guy's the first guy out the door in order to fix that. Goodbye. Sam Bam, what's up, bro? Number 2 tonight, he says, can you see any retreads other than Payton, Quinn, Dan Quinn, Frank Reich, Jim Harbaugh, or Jim Caldwell getting consideration? Can't think of anyone unless John Gruden gets some consideration. He was fired for a BS reason. I don't know that Gruden wants to wade back into the NFL. For what it's worth, his situation was ugly. I'll just put it that way. The way things ended there was ugly. But he's pretty much listed all the main retreads at this point, Zach.
Well, there's Bruce Arians. I don't know if he wants to come back. He's like a senior advisor or whatever on the Bucs staff. He also has health concerns. And a guy I read about recently who wants to give it another go in the NFL is Marvin Lewis. And that's the ultimate. I know he's the ultimate high floor guy, but I'm just naming names. And this is where, if it becomes like Marvin Lewis and Frank Reich and Jim Caldwell, look how much more appealing Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh sound in comparison.
I think this, even if you didn't, Zach, have now 7 years of a relative ineptitude as far as the Broncos product on the field, I still think this Walton Penner ownership group would be looking to make a big splash on this hire.
Okay.
But that only further intensifies the probability of the dent the Broncos' new owners are looking to make in the NFL universe with this hire. So I don't think they're going to go scraping a barrel that at the bottom of it you're looking, oh, there's Jim Caldwell, or maybe even Frank Reich. I like the idea of Frank Reich. He's not my number one option. I like him as a possibility. Okay. Here's my gut. They're going to swing at Payton. They're going to swing at Jim Harbaugh. Barring that, I think they might try Dan Quinn.
Yeah. And, interestingly enough, they can't, they have to be somewhat secretive about it, and they have to have a leverage point. But George Payton didn't outright dismiss the idea of hiring another first-time head coach. So, you know what? They're going to cast a wider net. And George Payton also, Chad, he showed remorse for not casting a wider net. And by that, he meant not interviewing the likes of Mike McDaniel or Doug Peterson or Brian Daboll. Pretty much the interviews, they weren't complex enough. But here's my thing. If it comes down to Jim Caldwell, I'd rather hire a Shane Steichen as a first-timer than go for the ultimate high floor guy in Jim Caldwell. That's my opinion.
Agreed, 110%. Eric Weber, what's up, bro? On Facebook, jumping in. Appreciate you. Evening Priest, Scout Kennedy, Broncos Country, and the MHH posse. To your point, Zach, kind of surprised Justin Outen still on the job. Happy New Year. What say you, Zach? Because, I can think of a funny phrase my father has used at times about a certain anatomy on a boar or a bull being useless.
Does it rhyme with pits?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, what say you?
I just want to know what he does. Like, literally, he shows up and apparently sleeps at the facility. What does he do while he's there? He's not calling plays. He's not exclusively with Russell Wilson. His best friend Hackett just got fired. He was only hired because of cronyism and because he was boys with Hackett. He is the most useless OC I think I've seen in NFL history. And it's just a matter of time before he's gone.
Yeah, like even in the past, remember Rick Dennison and some of the roles he's held at his respective NFL stops, including with the Broncos at times in Houston. As the offensive coordinator in Denver, he wasn't calling plays. That was Gary Kubiak. But he did have a big role on the game plan every single week because he was basically the run game coordinator. Pardon me. And he would interface with the offensive line, make sure all that was up to snuff. we knew what he was doing. We don't know what Justin Houghton's doing, for what it's worth. And Ejiro Evero, he goes way back with Hackett, all the way to college. Houghton, of course, is a guy that worked with Hackett in Green Bay. Doesn't necessarily have a personal connection to him beyond the fact that they worked together in Green Bay, and then Hackett gave him a chance here as an offensive coordinator that he now can put on his NFL resume. But I digress. Garth Knight, he says, Marvin Lewis made those Bengals relevant against heavy odds for a decade and a half. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take too much away from Marvin Lewis, but he it was just the guy that could never, ever get over the hump. You know, he was if you gave him a decade, your team would make the playoffs probably 6 or 7 out of those 10 years, and that's not nothing. But he had the likes of Carson Palmer. He had the tail end of the tail end of his time in Cincy. He had Andy Dalton, right, if I'm not mistaken, before. So it's not like he never had a quarterback, especially early on, dude. Like, he had one of the best young quarterbacks in the game, and Carson Palmer couldn't really move the needle. I mean, they were always a threat, generally speaking. They were a tough team. You know, you could count on them being a threat for the playoffs, Zach, but you could never get over the hump. Now, that was at his first stop. A lot of times, like in Mike Shanahan's case, you know, he couldn't get over the hump, but his first head coaching gig was so weird, it's hard to even consider that a head coaching gig with all the weird factors that took place there in Oakland at the time. But he got his first gig, boom, second gig, knocked it out of the park. We're talking about how long was I know for when he was done in Cincy, he was the longest tenured coach besides Bill Belichick. All right, in the NFL, 15 years. So what did he not learn, or what did he learn but was unable to fully exploit in Cincy in all those years that he would suddenly be able to do in Denver? That would be my question.
You know, you nailed it with not getting over the hump. He's in that Marty Schottenheimer, Jeff Fisher tier of coaches where they're not going to ever really go like 4-13, but you're not going to go 13-4 either. You're going to always be like a 9-10 win club. And listen, we would all settle for that right now, Chad, after years and years and years of losing records. But it's a hard sell or a hard hire to sell to the fan base who wants a Sean Payton, who wants a Jim Harbaugh, and maybe even a Frank Reich or Dan Quinn. Marvin Lewis is like the plan M in this case, but you can always do worse, I guess, in hindsight.
Pardon me, Austin. Appreciate you, bro. He says, if Harbaugh is available and on board, do you think he could want Jerry Rossberg as the special teams coordinator, since he did work extensively with his brother John in Baltimore? Yeah, I think that's a possibility for sure, especially if Jerry, if he beats the Chiefs, or even if he beats the Chargers. Both of these are playoff teams. It's another skin on the wall for him, and it could probably help. That's if he wants to continue to coach, by the way, which we don't know for sure that that's something he wants to do. He was pulled out of relative retirement to come do this gig. George Payton talked him into it.
Yeah, he was doing, I forgot the exact occupation, something to do with like sports science or something with like a hyperbolic chamber. He was trying his hand in and really investing his time in. He's going on 68 years old, and I don't think he wants a full-time coaching job, aka all that full-time stress beyond this season. So I appreciate what he's doing, but I think he's going to move on after this year.
Sam Bam, number 3 tonight. Thank you, bro. On the topic of Harbaugh, do you think if Michigan wins or loses the national title, or even loses to TCU, that it would have any bearing on Harbaugh returning to the NFL? I mean, if they win all the way, it might, but I don't think so. Otherwise.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin Flores. I did butcher. It's not hyperbolic chamber; it's hyperbaric chamber. But you know what I meant.
Charge it to the game.
It's more of a point on Harbaugh. I don't worry about the money, obviously, for the Broncos. He's getting, he's highly paid at Michigan. It's convincing him that his next stop, his return to the NFL, should be with the Broncos, arguably the worst team in the league, with a quarterback he's stuck with that's broken. You got to sell him on Russell Wilson. That's the big determining factor here. Not money, not what Michigan does in their bowl game. It's Russell Wilson and this Broncos team going forward.
It's not all that dissimilar, by the way, to when he took over San Francisco. All right. What year was that? Was it 10 or 11? I'm trying to remember. But either way, you had a young, well, not as young anymore, I guess is my point, former number 1 overall pick quarterback in Alex Smith, who had failed to meet any modicum of expectations relative to his draft pedigree. Unfairly, different offensive coordinator every year, a different system, I should say, every year of his initial career until Harbaugh landed there. And Harbaugh didn't look at that, Zach, as a disincentive to take the job in San Francisco. And what happened? Well, he made Alex Smith a thing, right? He turned Alex Smith around, and he ended up only using him for whatever it was. It was either a year and a half or 2.5 years before Colin Kaepernick and all that stuff. And we know what happened. He got dealt, did Smith to the Chiefs. But I don't think Russell Wilson kind of hitting the skids this year based on the depth of his resume, right? Which, let's also remember, Harbaugh has firsthand knowledge of the Russell Wilson resume, competing against him early on in his career with the Niners-Seahawks rivalry. But David Kilgore, number 2, thanks, bro. He says, would we really hire Sean Payton if his defensive coordinator is Vic Fangio? That's one of the reports that came out about a week ago. Would you guys be okay with that if it happens? I would be okay with it, but it's not going to happen. So if the Broncos did end up landing Payton, we're talking $100 million contract. At the end of the day, he might have, in a perfect world, wanted to have brought Vic Fangio with him. But hey, here's the Giro Evero, who springs off the Fangio tree, one of the hottest up-and-coming young defensive minds in the league that the Broncos will still retain rights to. I'm going to cleave unto my hundreds of millions, Zach, as opposed to the Vic Fangio dream.
I saw someone in the comments say that maybe Jim Harbaugh is cocky enough to come to the Broncos and he might be sick of college football. Yeah, he's cocky, but he's also very prideful and very egotistical. And Leadhead saying it there. And, he went out on his own terms in the NFL as a winner to come back to a losing franchise, which is what the Broncos are right now. He'd be tying his name to that. He'd be tying his reputation to that. So would ego get in the way there? Would he not want to go to maybe Indianapolis with an owner that's willing to open up the checkbook? He'd have his own handpicked quarterback, his own roster construction. That's the thing that you have to weigh with Harbaugh. Money's one thing, but as Payton said, selling him on this roster and selling him on Russell Wilson is quite another.
I think you got to start with, does Jim Harbaugh feel any pull to come back to the NFL? And knowing what we know about him and his brother and their competitive rivalry, something tells me that if there's anything driving him back toward the NFL, it's the fact that his brother has a Super Bowl ring, he doesn't. And by the way, it came at his expense. Those dudes are 2 of the most competitive human beings on the planet. And it might be a little bit Freudian trying to get into that headspace, but that could be the reason why these stories are kept alive about Harbaugh returning to the NFL, whether it's for a Broncos job or any of the past hiring cycles. What else does he have to prove? I mean, he could go and try and win a Super Bowl or whatever, but he's got it made in the shade with this Michigan gig. And he's a good recruiter. That can wear on people, on coaches over time, the whole recruiting process, for what it's worth. But if there's anything, maybe, Zach, that would open the door, if the Broncos, in other words, are trying to get their foot in the door to have a conversation with Jim Harbaugh to try and lure him back to the NFL with a massive compensation package and a pitch about, rebuilding it in your image from the ground up, etc., that might be what at least gets him to take the meeting.
And my apologies to David, by the way. I never answered his question. I want to echo something Scott said, which is I'll believe Vic Fangio as Payton's DC when I see it with my own eyes. That's a lot of conjecture right now, a lot of rumors flying around. And it wouldn't be the first time that a former head coach returned to, I think it was Gunther Cunningham did the same thing. He returned to his former team in a lesser role. So it wouldn't be unprecedented, but Vic Fangio, another prideful guy, would he come back and possibly work under the man who fired him in George Payton? I don't know about that.
Well, and also keep in mind, it's not like Vic Fangio won't have options. Vic Fangio chose to sit out this season. He could get there are teams right now with defensive coordinators who they would fire if Vic Fangio was willing to come on and be the guy. Vic Fangio, not cut out to be a head coach, but his resume as a defensive coordinator speaks for itself. So my point being here, Zach, that if things didn't work out with wherever Sean Payton might land, Vic Fangio's not losing any sleep over that. He can get a job just about anywhere, just about, not quite everywhere, but just about anywhere in the NFL. Garth says Harbaugh is smart. He won't go be a puppet to Jim Irsay's drunken, drugged delusions. You've got a point there, but he does have a little bit of a legacy tied to the Colts because of his time as a player there, kind of preceding the Peyton Manning arrival. But I don't think that would be enough to, as Garth puts here, to trump, as it were, the fact that Jim Irsay has jumped the shark in terms of going from being an owner that's kind of known to meddle here and there to like fully stepping in and botching the whole 9 yards.
You know, Irsay does have those delusions. No one really can deny that, but I feel like he would acquiesce more power to Harbaugh than Greg Penner would. Greg Penner, to me, is not a guy that takes no for an answer very often. He didn't get to where he is right now by being soft or by acquiescing much power. You have to weigh that as well. Would Harbaugh put his pride aside to work with another power-hungry guy? And, you know, while we're talking about head coaching candidates, I maybe to be a little more realistic, you watch this Dallas defense week in and week out, you wonder if they do end up with someone like Dan Quinn. It's no one's really first choice, but what he can do with this defense to get the team back to playing together and to energize the unit, you could do a lot worse than him as well.
BK, thanks for the super chat, big dog. He says, only thing I worry about Peyton are the draft assets. The Raiders gave up 2 first rounds, 2 second rounds. I think he's talking about the Raiders gave up 2 first rounds and 2 second rounds. I'm pretty sure that will be the starting point. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I've heard some conflicting things on what New Orleans might want to relinquish his rights, Zach. But the most common thing is the conversation starts with the first round pick. So at the same time, you know what? It's no skin off your teeth, New Orleans. Sean Payton still has good, from what I understand, good relationships with the brain trust there. So I don't think they'd necessarily be looking to subvert his next move. They'd probably want to do the best they could by him, considering everything he did for the franchise. So I think if Sean Payton wants to go somewhere, I think the Saints will do, within reason, they'll do their part to help him get what he wants.
I got to be honest, though, if I'm Mickey Loomis, if I'm the Saints, I want this more than I want draft picks.
Yeah.
They're a team that's perpetually in cap hell, and the Broncos can offer that because they have the richest ownership group. But according to, and I say this with a grain of salt, according to Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, the worst kept secret in league circles is Sean Payton returning to New Orleans, who already own his rights. And that's another obstacle the Broncos face. That's why Jim Harbaugh looks a little more appealing, because we all assume it would take the Broncos have a first-round pick, fine, trade it, this and that. What if they demand more? What if they want a first and 2/3? What if they want a first and 2/3 and a foundational player? There's a point of a bridge too far to trade for a head coach, and then at that point, maybe you just are better off with plan B.
We'll see. To that point, dialing all the way back to that previous super chat, John Gruden, when the late Al Davis, agreed to trade him to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tampa relinquished a 2002 and 2003 first-round draft pick, 2002 and 2004 second-round picks, and $8 million in cash. That was 20 years ago. All right, $8 million in cash then. In the NFL terms, that's like, $80 million in cash today, probably. And that's not something that a team like the Saints, who, they're just as bound by the salary cap rules as every other team, including the Broncos, despite the relative wealth of the Broncos ownership. But cash is a different thing. Having that cash available, especially if you are a cap strap team, some of those deals that you might be wanting to make that you would have lost out onto another team because they have the cash to offer specific bonuses up front or in a relative term that you couldn't offer, those are some of the competitive edges you give up when you are cash strapped and when you are right up against the cap. So I don't know. The whole thing with the Saints, they haven't really commented on it publicly, what's going on with Payton and what they might want. They're not going to. But I don't think if Sean Payton wants to go somewhere, all right, I think the Saints, they'll want to get theirs and et cetera, but I don't think they'll be unreasonable. They'll want to kind of take care of their boy who, he's the only coach that brought a modicum of winning to the New Orleans Saints. Right up to that point, I mean, you had some heroic, valiant teams in the past in New Orleans, including Aaron Brooks squads that were kind of like threatening right there as like a potential playoff team, could never get over the hump. You go way back to Peyton's dad playing quarterback, Archie Manning for the Saints, but they never had any success until Sean Payton showed up. So I think there's some semblance, Zach, of some loyalty there, some gratitude where they'll want to help him go wherever he wants to go. But they're not going to just take it on the chin. That's not what I'm saying, but keep that in mind.
Yeah, you're right. They'll do right by Sean Payton. But if the Broncos made arguably the worst trade in NFL history, giving too much up for Russell Wilson, I think they might be a little hesitant if New Orleans demands the world for Sean Payton.
They'll explore it. The Broncos are going to explore what it's going to take. All right. Explore the possibility of what gets Sean Payton to even open the door to talk to the Broncos. But there are other options in terms of making a splash. And you could even, Zach, if Jim Harbaugh says, I'm good, I'm staying in at the college level, and Sean Payton's not really feeling it, whatever, that's cool. Even a Dan Quinn hire as a retread. This is a guy similar to Harbaugh, got his team to the Super Bowl, most famous Super Bowl collapse of all time, of course, in Falcons Patriots. But you bring with him a combination, Darrell Bevell, you bring with him Brian Schottenheimer to fix Russ. That could still end up being a coaching hire that could pay some dividends.
It's ultimately, Chad, we all, or I shouldn't speak for everyone, I want Sean Payton. That's my number one target, but it's not too realistic. And I just want a coach, when it boils down to, that's going to fix Russell Wilson or get the most out of Russell Wilson and get the most out of this Broncos roster. I want the coach that can extract maybe 10 wins in 2023. It can be that fast. It can be that quick of a turnaround, even with all the questions we're facing right now, if you have the right coaching staff in place. So we'll see how it shakes out.
By the way, the Broncos, before we say goodnight, they signed a running back to the active roster. Zach, tell everybody what's up with that.
Yeah, this is Tyler Batty. And if you're a draftnik, you recognize the name from what he did at Missouri, where he was a first-team All-SEC selection and second-team All-American last year. He had close to 4,000 yards from scrimmage there and 34 touchdowns. He was a sixth-round pick of the Ravens, and the Broncos signed him off Baltimore's practice squad. He'll be the number 4 guy. I don't know how much run he's going to get behind Murray, Mack, and Chase Edmonds, but he's a solid pass-catching back at like 5'8", $197, and maybe he's a reserve futures contract candidate when the season ends.
All right. We're about out of time. Let's grab Garth real quick, and then we'll probably say goodnight. Appreciate you again, Garth. He says, honestly, I'm in a Jim Irsay state of mind at the moment, and I'm willing to charge forth with Jerry Rosberg for the foreseeable future, results unseen. Hey, dude, Jerry, I'm telling you, he makes for a really good initial press conference, impression. But let's see what he can. Well, let's see what the results offer up, right? And it's not easy. You go from being basically an advisor role to now you're the head coach. And guess what? The first team you draw, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs, could be a buzzsaw. And then we want this is the type of thing where we're like laughing at the notion of Rosberg having the competency to be anything more than an assistant. But we'll see. Crazier things have happened. You know what? 14 straight games. That streak has to snap at some point. Maybe these players, Zach, in Denver, are sick of all the BS. And, a lot of times when a coach is fired like that, it's just like last year when things happened with John Gruden and he stepped down / got fired with the Raiders. It was like an inspiring moment. We thought it would throw them and discombobulate them, and they'd come into Denver like punch drunk, and the Broncos could just exploit them. Not how it shook out. It ended up being kind of an energizing factor. We don't know yet what kind of factor the Hackett firing is going to have for the Broncos. We'll see.
Not to discount Rosberg's press conference, and I really do like the way he carries himself, and it was refreshing. But do you think there's like a recency bias here because of how bad the Broncos head coaches have been? I mean, Hackett speaks for himself, but even Vic Fangio's first press conference, Chad, he was calling out Von Miller. So I think we're just all so desperate and thirsty for a competent adult at head coach, and Rosberg provides that, at least for 2 games.
We'll see. This is Batty, his Senior Bowl highlights, courtesy of Mr. Producer himself, Scott Kennedy. So just as we finish things up, you can keep an eye on how this kid looked at the Senior Bowl. Let's grab this super chat from Patrick West, and then we are going to say goodnight. He says, as a Seahawks fan, by the way, thank you, Patrick. I've been watching and thoroughly enjoying the Broncos and Russell's dumpster fire season, but I've also come to appreciate you real Broncos fans toughing it out. And I wish you luck next year. Well, thanks. We appreciate that, Patrick, and for the super chat. Really, we do. It'll be fun to see where this Batty cat fits in, but it's 2 games. We'll see what kind of an impact he can make, Zach.
Patrick, I want to curse you out so bad, but I'd be doing the same thing if I were you, talking the same amount of trash if the roles were reversed. All I have to say is enjoy that top 5 draft pick.
With that, we're going to say goodbye for now. We're going to say good evening. We'll be back, of course, Sunday for the gut reaction, but we got some messages for you.
Yes, sir. That was the Mile High Huddle podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. As Chad said, we're off until Sunday for the gut reaction. In the meantime, though, follow us on Twitter at the MHH Pod and the main account on Twitter at Mile High Huddle. Chad's on Twitter at Chad and Jensen. Myself is at Kelberman NFL. And Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch, you're to know what it is, where it is. I'll say it once more, though. HuddleUpPod.com. Get your merch on when you get a chance. And Facebook.com/MileHuddlePod. Be sure you're liking that page and following that page. If you haven't, go to Apple Podcasts. Leave your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some of that merch each and every month. But if anything, guys, please, it takes 3 seconds for 3 steps. Subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
Shout out to these great super chat superstars and supporters on Facebook tonight, starting with Sam Bam, Rob Bucksbaum. But I'm not sure. Is that how you say it, Rob? You'll have to let us know. Drake, Rello, Naj, the Duchess in the house, Michaela Parker. Love you. Good to see you. Garth Knight, David Kilgore, Austin H. Let's see. We got BK. We got Patrick West, the Seahawks fan. Appreciate each and every one of you. And Eric Weber, Phil McLaughlin on Facebook. Much love and respect, guys. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you on Sunday.
Have a good start to your new year as well, guys. Be safe out there. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.